name's Mary, and today we're going to talk about how to get a job as a college student. So I'm going to split this off into two sections. The first is on-campus or near-campus employment, and the next is internship and post-grad. Second thing I just want to prime us with is that there's specific knowledge that you need to know per vertical that you might be recruiting for. So whether that's tech product management, whether that's SWE, whether that's consulting, whether that's banking, or whether that's venture capital, which is what I do. And I'm actually going to produce videos in the future that talk about those verticals in more details. But for now, this is the primer video for all of that. And the last thing I want to start us off with before we jump into things is that philosophically, I'm a big believer that getting a job in college is not the only reason that you're going to college. In fact, the thing that you're trying to get in your life is figure out a sense of who you are, what you want to do, and especially what you find meaningful such that you actually want to do it. And you will find that a lot of people who go into college knowing that I want to be a doctor or I want to be a consultant, and they come out and they do those things, will have a enormous midlife crisis where they will waste a lot of emotion and they will realize they have wasted a lot of energy pursuing what other people wanted them to be and not actually having an understanding of who they are. That is just some philosophical primer, but now we're going to jump into the actual contents of this video. Okay, so we're going to begin with two general tips. The first is when people say that networking is important, this is true, but there are categories of people in which networking with them is actually not that important, and then I think categories of people that people often forget about but are actually really important to network with. So in terms of what is actually not very important, so people often go for example, professionals in that field who actually do not have decision-making power over you being hired. For example, let's say you meet an engineer who's been working for 5 years at Google, or you meet a VP who is at this bank that you want to work at. There is a really, really good chance that they are not at all involved in the hiring process. They might be useful in getting a referral if you're really close with them, and they are definitely useful in terms of asking them and trying to figure out whether you would actually like working at that company. But as a whole, that is a category that I find a lot of college students spend a lot of time in and does not help with your recruiting process. In terms of two categories of people that actually really help in terms of networking, the first is people who have just gone through it. So for example, let's say you have some friends who are a semester or a year or 2 years older than you who have gone through the recruiting process or are now interning or working at the company that you want to work at. Those people are super useful because they are the most relevant. They have the most up-to-date information on how they actually did what they did. And so meeting them through whatever social activities or pre-professional activities that you can and picking their brain is the best source of information when it comes to this stuff. The second group of people are people who are actually decision makers at companies you want to work at. So whether that is getting to know the co-founder of a startup that you want to work at, or whether that is, for example, like getting to know recruiters who work at the company that you want to work at. They might not be decision makers in terms of who's actually going to get the internship, but they probably are decision makers in that they can say no to you, or that they can provide information on when the portal is open and other very, very useful stuff. You might know a decision maker at a really big company, like if you happen to be connected to them, but that's probably not the case for most people, which is why I recommend these other two categories as important categories to network with. The second general tip is that if you think about categories that or verticals that you want to recruit for, so I would consider like consulting or banking or software engineering, product management, venture capital, as large verticals that you might be interested in, I would pick recruiting up to 2 of them max, maybe 1, maybe 2, probably not more. And that is because they all have very specialized knowledge and very specialized recruiting processes that run on certain timelines, such that you are worse off being mediocre at a lot of things. You are much better off being great at literally anything. So that's a tactical piece of advice. And like I said, in future videos, I'm going to tackle those verticals, or at least some of those verticals that I was involved in, which include product and venture capital, more specifically. So if you're interested in those, subscribe to see those videos. So we're going to begin with how to get a job on or near campus. If you are only interested in internships or post-grad / full-time opportunities, I would just skip to the next section. Anyways, okay, on-campus employment. So first, every school that I've heard of at least has a centralized database that you can filter by the parameters you're interested in, including how many hours that job entails, whether it counts for work study, whether it's on campus, what department it's a part of, etc. Through this centralized portal that I'm sure someone at your school can help you find. The next type of employment opportunity on campus that I think is quite common is teaching or research opportunities with a class. Now, the way to be involved with that is first, again, you can look through your centralized database. Those are often posted there. Second, I would make sure that you are on the mailing list for these classes before, during, and after you take them, and to actually read them. So very commonly after a class, you might see an email that says, hey, there's a TA opportunity, a teaching assistant opportunity for the next semester. You can apply here. And then finally, you can actually go to the professors themselves and ask if they have any teaching assistant opportunities, course assistant opportunities, or perhaps research opportunities that you can be a part of. You just need to get a little bit comfortable talking to your professors, which is actually always a good thing. Finally, there are local jobs in the area that are less pre-professional, but you might also want to be involved in, whether that's babysitting for people who live nearby, or dog sitting or dog walking or things like that. There are apps for this. There are also local newsletters, and sometimes these are featured in these centralized databases as well. A couple things I want to warn you about is one, watch out for scams. So try to validate, that these are real jobs and that they're safe jobs. And the second thing is, as an international student, you cannot do off-campus employment, including any of these near-campus jobs. I know some friends who just get paid under the table, and I think that's fine if that's the decision you want to make. But personally, I look at the minor risk between I get caught and then the major consequence of not being allowed into the country in the future. And that's just something that I am not willing to do. So that's something I want to warn international students about in particular. Okay, so now we're going to talk about internships as well as post-grad / full-time opportunities. The first thing I want to emphasize is I think people should sign up for every email list that they think is remotely relevant and actually read through them every single day. They'll read through them quickly. So for example, if you were studying computer science at Harvard, we had the Harvard Computer Science Association, Women in Computer Science, all of these clubs. I just signed up for all of their email lists and I would quickly read through them every day. I actually got my junior internship this way, and you will be so surprised how many opportunities are missed because people don't read their emails very much. Also, one thing to note for international students is you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to internships because you can use your CPT very broadly at any company. Your visas actually become more restrictive over time, so definitely take, while you are an undergrad or while you are a student, the opportunity to explore. In this first section, we are going to talk about startups, which, by the way, is a really fantastic way to build experience because startups always need people, and they really often like college students. So I would say that the highest hit rate method for getting a job, particularly a startup, is what I call doing a pre-project / sending really aggressive emails. What I mean by this. So a pre-project is when you take work that you would be doing for them anyways and demonstrate that you can do it by doing essentially a mini project and sending it off to the right person. So for example, when I tried to get an internship at a marketing firm, I looked at their website. This was actually when I was a senior in high school, but this applies to college students too. I looked at their website, I wrote essentially a list of things that I would change and demonstrated how I would market their site better, doing a little bit of work, and then I sent it off to the CEO and I got hired there. Or another example is, let's say you want to get a product role. Maybe for a startup you say, I've evaluated the market, here's some of the research I've done, here's a product that I think would really resonate with your audience, send it off to the right person. Another thing I did is I took a BD role. By the way, all of these are true examples. I tried to get a business development internship, and essentially I tried to research as much as I could about this company. Then I wrote down a strategic plan of what they could do for the next 6 months, and I sent it off to the right person. Now, that is a pre-project. I also call it an aggressive email because that's a pretty aggressive email to receive, but people find it very impressive and they tend to respond to it, or at least listen to it, because clearly you've put in the effort. Now, how do you actually get to the right person? Actually, to be honest, I can make a whole video about this, but one of the best ways to be involved with startups on your campus is with all likelihood, an entrepreneurship center either on your campus or somewhere near your campus. There's a community of entrepreneurish-ish people, that's not a word, and they will have a directory of companies, often with contacts that you can contact directly, or you can find them on LinkedIn and contact them this way with your pre-project / progressive email. I'm also going to link a Medium article down below, which is how I first heard about this in high school. The title is something along the lines of like how to get a job you're not qualified for. But yeah, that was super useful. It's not my idea, but it has worked like 3 times in my life. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how you can get an internship or a full-time job at a large company. Unfortunately, the pre-project idea works really well for startups, so it works very poorly for big companies because they can't recruit like that. Like, that's not disciplined. So the first thing that I would recommend you do is compile a list of programs that you qualify for, as well as their application dates, or just compile a list, if you're looking at full-time roles, of full-time roles and their application dates. In terms of internships, a lot of big companies actually have programs targeted towards specific years. So for example, at least when I was around, like Google had a freshman sophomore program, Palantir had a sophomore program, Deloitte had a freshman program for certain people, Goldman takes sophomore onward or something along those lines. To get the most up-to-date version of this information, I would Google it, and I would also talk to people who are, again, just a few years older than you or like a semester older than you who have gone through this process before. Now, to emphasize how important this is, it depends a little bit on the industry, but for example, in consulting and banking, first-year analysts, so people who just graduated from your school, will actually pull resumes. So you knowing them, very, very valuable for figuring out what they're looking for. When it comes to tech, that's not the case, and so it's a little bit less of a tie. However, the people who have just gone through it can tell you a lot about, for example, what fairs are really important. Like if you're a woman in CS, Grace Hopper is an amazing way to get interviews and then get internships and get jobs. That's something that being friends with people who have just gone through this will really, really help you with. Okay, so now we're gonna go from sort of most likely to get you a job to least likely to get you a job, but still all very, very valid ways. So the easiest way to get a job, or the most likely way, is if you apply directly through your school's portal, and that is because they have direct relationships with those companies, such that those companies have explicitly thought to themselves, we want to hire people from this school. Another top way of getting a job is getting a referral from someone who currently works there. For example, in tech, you can get friends or other people who have a referral link, who, by the way, often get a bonus for referring you successfully, to send you a referral code. That's a really great thing to ask for if you're friends with these people. If you don't feel comfortable asking, I would also recommend joining Facebook groups where, for example, women in CS hang out, because at the end of the summer, they will often, or at the beginning of fall, they will often offer referral codes to the first few people who sign up. So that's another great way to get referral codes or referrals, and those really, really do help with your application. The next thing that's pretty helpful is career fairs. You should ask, again, people who are just a couple years older than you or a little bit older than you, which career fairs are more relevant than others. But what you will need to do in preparation for a career fair is first have printed versions of your resumes that you are willing and able to hand out to recruiters while you're there. Sometimes I've seen them star it, and so they actually end up starring it in the application system as well, that this is someone, through talking to you, that they should flag. Another important thing to do before a career fair is practice in front of a mirror the questions that you are going to be asked, which is essentially tell me about yourself. Be able to talk about the projects you've done or the experience that you have or the academic experiences that you've had in a really succinct way, because you are going to get asked this a ton at career fairs. Now, something to note overall is the timing of all of this matters, and knowing the timing of all of this matters. So for example, when I was recruiting for big tech companies, they would recruit the fall for summer internships and full-time roles. For consulting, they would also recruit in the fall. For startups, they recruit in the spring for summer interns. And for banking, especially if you're a woman, they recruit sophomore year for junior internships. You can see why getting the timing on this stuff is important. Now, finally, the last thing I would recommend, which is still helpful, but I would say is the lowest probability in helping you, is set up LinkedIn and Google Job notifications based on the parameters that you're looking for. So for example, you say, I'm interested in an internship for this summer, or I'm interested in a full-time role in software engineering in this city, and you will get an email on whatever basis you want, maybe on a weekly basis, with all of the new jobs that are available, and you can just submit your resume or other things that you may need. This is definitely the easiest thing to do, but also sort of the least likelihood of helping you, because you are a fresh, cold person in their pipeline and you're gonna have to convince them all the way through, which happens all the time. But I do recommend the other things first, because you really have an advantage as a college student if you go through the pipelines that are already prepared for you. So now we're going to talk through 3 things I want to note in particular if you're applying to internships/full-time opportunities as a college student. The first thing I just want to note strategically is that return offers are a lot easier to get than initial jobs. And that's because, let's say for a return offer, let's say they give 50% of a 50-person class a return offer, versus with jobs, applying for the first time, you might be one of 1,000 applicants, so you can see why probabilistically that's harder. Another thing to note is that when you get your return offer, that is actually the best time to negotiate various parts of your salary or your vacation time, etc. Just something to keep in mind. Next thing, we're going to talk through my strategy if I was to do it all over again. So this, by the way, is going to come from a very privileged position, and I do want to note that, but if I were to do it all over again, I recommend to people younger than me who are in privileged positions that I would spend a lot of time exploring. I know as a freshman, when you see someone who's like working at this big name company, you're like, wow, I want to do that too. But trust me, you can work for the rest of your life. You have much less opportunity to be a college student and to explore and to have a lot of fun. So if I was to do it all over again, as a freshman, I would do whack stuff, and then as a sophomore, I would do whack stuff, and then in junior year, I would get serious about finding a job, and then hopefully that would convert into a full-time role. But even if you don't feel comfortable kind of doing and